like to introduce the next speaker, who's Damien Cook. We'll talk about traditional owners working in restoring wetlands in the Riverina. So over to you, Damien. Thank you.
Yeah, everyone. I'm here representing the Barappa Wamba Water of the Country Committee with their permission. So I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And I'd like to say I'm deeply grateful for being welcomed onto this country, this beautiful country of the Larrakia people, and acknowledge their elders and leaders. And I can certainly feel the love that Annie Lee was talking about when I walk on this land. It's it's a pretty special place to be. Just like to frame it globally, and we'll work down to a local sort of level. Loss and degradation of wetlands is a global issue, and I might be telling you stuff you already know, but we've lost probably 64 to 71% of the global area of wetlands in the last century. And in some parts of Australia, Europe and North America, we've lost over 90%. Where I grew up in West Gippsland, we destroyed the Karam and the Kuirup swamps, two huge freshwater wetlands, and we've probably destroyed about 99% of the wetlands in that region. So, and 50% of our wetland communities that we've mapped quite thoroughly in Victoria are endangered. So, so it's a pretty dire looking situation globally. And there's just some wetlands all around the world that are threatened by different processes like hydro schemes, overdevelopment, overgrazing, siltation, and pollution. So I work with the Barappa and Wemba communities, and they were a bit shy to come up here, so they've sort of pushed me forward to tell their story a bit. But their country is really rich in wetlands. So you've got the the Murray River flowing here. There's actually two Ramsar sites. So you've got Gumbala Island Ramsar site, which is here, and this is the Kerang Wetlands Ramsar site. So Ramsar internationally significant wetlands, but you can see the wetlands in the floodplain here are a bit more intact. There's a big continuous piece of bush, but the problem there is river regulation. So the wetlands on the floodplain there, pre-river regulation, flooded once every year or so. With river regulation, they would only flood once every 10 or 20 years. So there's environmental watering, which is part of, I suppose, of an ecological restoration process to try and get some water back on that floodplain. The wetlands out here have a bunch of different issues. You can see all this irrigated agriculture around the wetlands. But basically, you've got the Murray, the Loddon, and the Avoca rivers. So three really quite big rivers coming into one place. And when we get widespread rain, that all gets choked up and backs back, and this whole area becomes an inland sea. And fresh water, obviously, and all these wetlands get connected up. And it did happen in 2011, and it's pretty amazing when it happens. You can fly over it. These lunettes become little islands because they're high bits of ground, and the whole place we get huge bird breeding events. But this map shows the quality of the vegetation in the wetlands. So there's Gumbala Island. It's a nice big green patch because it's in fairly good nick, even though it's been a bit starved of water because of all the river regulation. But you can see all these wetlands all through here. There's a big strip of red. That's all due to poor condition of wetlands because of changed hydrology. And that's basically a big irrigation system which sucks water out of the Murray and pushes water through Cow Swamp, which is an incredibly important area, and then down through this system of wetlands to feed irrigated agriculture in this area here. And so, so that irrigation has caused, basically they've drowned those wetlands. They were full of trees. They're now all dead. So we have an amazing reference ecosystem on Gumbala Island. This is Rudi Lagoon, and it's in fantastic nick. It's got about 6 species of submerged aquatic plants. It's actually the most intact wetland I've ever seen in the whole Murray-Darling Basin, and it gets environmental water. And I think this is a real success story that we work a lot with the North Central Catchment Management Authority, and they manage water deliveries. They deliver water to this wetland every year, and it's really amazing. And it's a real hotspot. The Barappa people just love going and hanging out there. There's actually a place called the Wedding Tree, and lots of the families go and get married there. So it's a really special spot. But unfortunately, most of the wetlands look like this. There's about 13,000 hectares of dead red gum and black box And a lot of that was caused by changes in hydrology, over irrigation, bringing up the saline groundwater, and also farmers putting too much water in wetlands. When they order irrigation water, and then if it rains, they have what they call rain rejection flows, and they just dump that in a wetland. And so these wetlands, this is a sort of semi-arid region, so we get 1.4 metres of evaporation every summer. So any wetland that's shallower than that, if we don't get a lot of summer rain, everything dries out every year. And that's what the red gums like. They like to flood and they like to dry out. And red gums can stand in water for, say, 3 or 4 years. They're pretty adapted to waterlogging. But if you push it out to 30 years, which is where a lot of these wetlands were full for 30 years in a row, you'd basically kill every tree. And some of these trees are absolutely massive. And these trees are still great habitat. They're still full of microbats and even things like pythons, but they're all slowly falling over and rotting away. And they don't look anything like the healthy sort of reference condition of the red gum wetlands. But it's not all bad. We actually had the millennium drought, which was fantastic. We had 15 years of below average rainfall, dropped the water tables down about 5 or 6 metres, made water expensive, so the farmers had to get really efficient with it. And it's actually caused a huge regeneration of native species. So wetlands that were looking dead like that didn't have a live tree for 50 or 100 years. In the floods in 2011, a bit of seed got spread around, and we actually noticed natural regen, and that was our cue to go, wow, we can step in and help with this. So the Brappa and Wemba guys started these programs, and we've now planted, in one system, we've planted 11,000 trees back into the Karangi marshes, and we've had over 90% survival, and we've got trees 4 or 5 metres tall over about 2 or 3 year period. So that's worked really well. These are the black box communities, Eucalyptus largiflorans, so on the sort of outer verges of the floodplains, really diverse understories, lots of different sorts of nardoo and food and medicine plants. But when it goes saline, it kills all the black box, and the understory becomes weedy. I've covered most of this stuff in this slide, but basically it's talking about, so we've got the Brappa Wemba Water for Country Committee. We don't have a registered Aboriginal party, so we're still working towards that. And again, I think that's a cultural, one of those, a justice barrier that we're struggling to get the families together to actually form a registered party so we can access more funding. But these guys are working on that. And there's also a not-for-profit company being set up called Barappa Land and Water. And they're amazingly well-resourced and really skillful at what they do, and just pushing their way into that NRM space. So we've basically started a landscape scale project. So it's across both the tribal areas of Brappa and Wemba people. It covers literally thousands of square kilometres, and we're focusing on the wetland complexes through that area. And because we want to, basically we've got to get the canopies back. We've got to link them all back up again and get the hydrology back to something that's good. So with that millennium drought and the dropping of the salinity, and with now the delivery of environmental water, we can actually do complementary actions around the watering to restore the wetlands. So the things we've done are fencing, fire management, weed control, re-veg of both canopy trees and ground layers, and monitoring. So it's a really significant area. This is a canoe scar at a place called Ganawara, or McDonalds Swamp is its white name. That's Sean Berryman. Sean and I worked on a project in here to plant a lot of trees back and try and restore this understory, which is now dominated by kabungi because it was wet for too long, and we're trying to push it back to being a more diverse understory. We've got these wetlands are full of Aboriginal evidence of occupation, so things like oven mounds, scar trees, artefact scatters, and full of important plants like the old man weed here, which is one of the important bush medicine plants. It's called old man weed because it's very wise. It can cure lots of different diseases. And when we're working, we find lots of tools. There's scar trees everywhere. The scarred black box there, scarred red gum. And because this area doesn't have much natural rock, all this sort of stuff's been carried in. But people made clay balls as heat beads, so you can really easily identify Aboriginal hearths in this area because there's all this clay that's been squished into heat beads, and you'll quite often see little kids' fingerprints in it. Apparently, kids were sent off to make clay balls and squish it up to have them make the heat beads. So in the wetlands, we have a real diversity of fauna. We've got the nationally endangered Australasian bittern. We've got a really healthy breeding population of those guys. There's only about 1,000 of them left, and quite a lot of them hang out in the Kerang Ramsar site. freckled duck. The turtle is a really important totemic animal for the order, the Barappa and Wemba, and the Murray-Darling carpet python. So the objectives of the projects were obviously to engage the TOs to work on their own country. We wanted to encourage the regeneration of the tree canopy and the ground layer, including lots of culturally significant food and medicine and fibre plants. We want to restore the nesting and roosting habitat for wetland birds, because, as I said, when these wetlands flood, they're an incredible net producer of baby water birds, and we need that in the Murray-Darling Basin, because we've seen a 90% loss of water bird numbers in the last 30 years. So we're looking at an ecosystem in massive decline. It's in free fall, and we've got to do something to stop that. We wanted to replace the source of fallen timber for reptiles, replace the habitat structure for woodland birds, restore ecosystem functions such as carbon storage, because you can imagine these wetlands store huge amounts of carbon. And we want to do it based on best practice, restoration, and environmental justice frameworks. And so this is just some examples. So this is McDonalds Swamp Ganawara Swamp prior to we started work. Every tree in the wetland's dead. It's all weedy understory. There's a bit of kabungi. And we've basically just, with using the environmental watering, you see these trees we've planted here. We've planted them at roughly the density we think they should be. And this is about 5 years after they were planted. They're getting up there sexually mature. They're going to start spreading their own seed. And we've also replaced the understory here with the flooding. We can actually drown out the weeds. So all the stuff we do is organic. We don't use any nasty herbicides. We just use the water to control the weeds. We've planted nardoo here, which is an important food plant. And there's a basket sedge here, or a pungort. It's an indigenous name for weaving. One of the things we're focused on is this is a nationally endangered Sennecio, or the stiff groundsel. It was thought to be extinct for 100 years. We rediscovered about 5 little populations. We did a dating service. We brought them all back into a nursery. We played some music, played a bit of Barry White, turned the lights down, got some native bees in, and we've produced a really nice viable seed. If you try and collect the seed off the individual populations, there's not enough genetic diversity in the scattered populations to get viable seed. But when you bring them together, now we've got good seed, and we've planted literally hundreds of these back across the landscape, and they're doing really well. As you can see, that was initially planted in that garden, and now it's sort of spreading out. So the guys are pretty happy about that. These are guards where we're establishing aquatic plants. The water ribbons are a really important staple food plant. The base of each one of these has about 2 kilos of tubers. And they're really, really significant for food. And you can see Uncle Duck. Uncle Duck's a great name, isn't it, for a guy who's restoring wetlands? I love Uncle Duck and his daughter Laura there, working away, putting the guards up. And the guards come off when the plants are big enough to survive the birds. And there's just an endangered buttercup that's thriving. Again, you can see its initial cage, and then it's sort of spreading out. So Barappa Land and Water, this is a great example of economic self-determination, where these guys have got their act together to, they've even bought things like big machinery. They can do slashing, they can do, they do burns, they conduct cultural burns, and they're getting some quite big contracts now with our local Parks Victoria. These are just some data on you're going from, there's a thing called index of wetland condition, which we're monitoring the wetlands with. So we've gone from very poor to moderate at Ganawara Swamp, and there's the restoration wheel. We're sort of starting to get some more species back. There's another couple of examples of getting trees back into wetlands. And again, we've gone from poor to very poor. So that, there's early stages, but hopefully over the next few years, we'll see more trees maturing and spreading their seeds around. This is one of those trees I was talking about. We planted that was only 18 months after it was planted. You see Wayne's pretty excited about the growth of it there. And again, getting water ribbons established. Another project we've got a bush tucker grassland, restoring some grassland. It's a lot of the bush food plants like the tarvine, the muruan or the yam daisy, bulbine lily, all have edible tubers. And but the problem is most of our grasslands used to look like this on the riverine plain. More than 99% of it's been cleared, and the sheep ate all the yam daisies. When the first Europeans bought the first sheep, the sheep discovered that this was really good tucker as well, and dug them all up. And so we've got this project to plant them back. So we got this bit of degraded grassland beside. We're actually restoring this wetland as well. So we thought, well, we'll do a bit of grassland next door, and we started off with using an organic herbicide called pelargonic acid, which basically is great for killing annual grasses. and doing a bit of burning. I got duck there burning, and then we were supposed to be fenced, but the fence took too long, so we ended up just individually guarding the stuff. So there's a yam daisy or a mawan. You dig that up, it's got a beautiful little tuber. Downy Swainson peas endangered in our area, and there's Joanne making some little cages to protect the baby plants. So the benefits, we've got ecological benefits. We've improved the condition and wildlife habitat values. We've got handing on of cultural knowledge, medicine and fibre plants, and people getting to visit important places. We've got social connections happening, cross-generation exchange. We've got a partnership of culture and science. We've got capacity building with the Brappa Land and Water, and we're enhancing the ecosystem services for the local farming in the area, because that's important to do that as well. So to get the rest of the community on side. So this is the family, and planting out 3 generations, all planting out together, and I suppose they're teaching me how to be their ally to do all this. Like we do all the planning together of what they want to plant, and they basically run their own show and show up when they want to, and yeah, I just sort of try and facilitate as much of it as I can. That's Uncle Duck. There's a little quote from him there. Read that quickly because I've got another one to show you. There's Rochelle. Getting out and planting trees and other native plants is good for country. When we do that work, we strengthen our connection to country and family. It's about doing the right thing for the earth. And there's Uncle Dixie making a coolamin. I really wanted Dixie to come because he's got an amazing story. He's had really bad drug and alcohol issues, mental health issues, but he says working on country has basically healed him, and now he's totally off the grog and learning how to make coolamins and teaching that to his sons and other kids. So it's a pretty amazing story. So yeah, we're restoring the habitat for these guys so they can breed, and these guys and these guys. And the outcomes, we've employed 32 traditional owners. We've done 3,000 hours of work. We've planted 25,000 Indigenous plants. We've improved veg quality over 1,000 hectares of wetlands. And yeah, we've created employment in a rural area where jobs are scarce. And we're passing on knowledge. So I think that's the last slide.